Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consol, your host. Two quick things before introducing you to my guest. First, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast by clicking on the follow button and also clicking on the bell icon so you are alerted to each new edition of the program. Second, in addition to being the producer of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I've written 4 books, 3 novels, and 1 short story collection. In the episode notes, you will find a short link to my Amazon page and all 4 of those titles. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Jane Bow. She is a Canadian novelist. She grew up in Canada, the United States, Spain, England, and Czechia. 3 of her 4 novels have been award finalists in Canada, the United States, and Britain. She has also written for literary journals and CBC Radio and has presented her work internationally. She lives in beautiful Victoria, Canada, and she's out with a new novel titled The Angel's Share. Jane Bow, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Jane, let me begin with this new novel you have, The Angel's Share, and it's a thrilling heist novel. There's sexuality in it. There's middle age in it. All the kind of things that most people can relate to. Give us the overview of the novel. Give us a walkthrough. What's the summary?
The Angel's Share is a romantic thriller about the nuclear power of love. And this is the thing, it's a romance, but love is probably one of the most powerful forces on the planet in human affairs. And so the Angel's Share is talking about the nuclear power of love in sex, in winemaking, and in Dion, that's my main character, and her 94-year-old grandmother's heist of a Russian oligarch's $2 million bottle of cognac.
I love it already. I love that phrase, the nuclear power of love.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So go ahead. That I just had to say that's just a great phrase. I'm going to steal it someday, Jane.
Well, that's the thing. One of the things I wanted to do with this book is to talk about the beauty and the distinctiveness of female sexuality and what sexuality has to do with love, because we're seeing sex everywhere, and in this day and age, it's wonderful to see women free in the Western world to play with sex in any way and with whoever they want, whenever, however they want, and that's great. But the fact is that the female body is very different from the male body. And
thank God for that.
Yeah, and the experience of sex is very different. We don't see that in movies. We see dramatic encounters and so on, but we don't see the difference between the male and the female. And we also don't see much about what love has to do with it. And in a time when the world is in such a mess in so many ways, and there are so many things to be afraid about and to worry about, and to argue about, it seems to me a good time to celebrate what love can do for us. And at the most basic level and the most central level have to do with our relationships with each other's physically.
Well, now you used to use the phrase the distinct female sexuality. I may not have gotten that exactly. What's distinct about female sexuality? Is it the psychological component? There's a saying that men want sex to connect. Women need to connect before they're willing to have sex.
Yeah.
It may run along those lines a little bit. I mean, men relate to sex very differently than women. I think you'd agree.
Well, of course, because all you have to do is look at the physiology involved, and what's happening in the two kinds of bodies. And in the female body, it's only in the last few decades that we have even understood what arousal is in the female body and how that works, you know. And there's been an awful lot written and online about young women and middle-aged women, really, who say they have never really had the opportunity to experience fulfillment sexually. And and that's, you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lack of information. There's a lot of ignorance and inhibition amongst women and men, really, about what it is. What does a female body need in order to reach fulfillment sexually? And you know, female bodies are incredibly different. What one body needs is totally different from another, but that's a little bit different from the male experience because, you know, because of the physiology, the penis is a thing that becomes erect and that projects, and the woman's body is very different. It doesn't work the same way. So what's going on in the mind of a woman is very, very important. I know it's true for men as well, but I think for women it's extremely important. And my experience with women over time has taught me that it takes us a while, it takes us longer, it takes trust. And if there's no trust, it's not the same experience for a woman.
Right. That word is used all the time with women when it comes to relationships and sex is trust. And men haven't exactly earned a lot of trust. I mean, taking men as a category, as a gender, it's just amazing how many women talk about the infidelity and it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean sexual infidelity. There's other forms of infidelity between
Mhm.
men and women, but trust
Mhm.
is just a central word among women because men do a fairly lousy job of earning that.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to ask you the woman who stole the cognac, the $2 million bottle of cognac from the Russian oligarch she's how old?
Well, Dion is the main character. She's 39.
Oh, she's
And
39. Okay.
she's 39, but she's turning 40. In fact, she does turn 40 during the course of the novel. And her grandmother is 94. And Dion is a woman who has been totally unfulfilled sexually. Here she is 39. She has no partner. She can't make sex work. She's never had an orgasm. And she doesn't know about love with a man. And now she's in Crete helping her father and her grandmother try to save their winery. And so, I mean, there's just no men in her world. But the thing is, when the novel opens, she's in a gully behind the winery where she thinks she's pretty safe and pretty private, and she wants to sunbathe in the nude in this gully. So she screws up her courage. And, you know, she's Canadian. Like, she's not really experienced in lying around outside naked. So,
Oh, you mean because of the weather? Well, you have
well,
summers in
not
Canada.
just the weather, you know, we're very polite and very quite conservative out
Modest.
here.
Yes, very
There are not a
modest.
lot of nudist beaches. There's some, but not a lot. So
Well, that's what
she,
California and other places in the United States and Europe are for.
well, that's right. Exactly. That's
Well,
right. Yeah, you,
we're not gonna answer the question as to whether she achieves the orgasm because that would be a spoiler alert. We don't want to do that, but I do want to know, are there sex scenes in the novel?
oh, yes. Well, yes. There are. The thing is, it's not an erotic novel. It has physicality in it. There is eroticism just by virtue of the subject matter. But when she's lying in this gully, she looks up at one point and there is a guy. And he's not supposed to be there. You know, it's wilderness. It's in Crete and it's in this gully. And what is he doing there, you know? And so a relationship develops between this guy who's a vagabond artist, actually, and he wants to draw desire. And she's like, give me a break, go and find somebody else. And he's in his late 20s, so he's a lot younger than her. So the relationship between these two completely, misfitted characters is really fun to play with. And it all starts with sensuality, not sexuality, but sensuality, touch, and just
And
becoming
in
aware.
verbal intimacy as well.
Verbal intimacy? Well,
Oh, maybe not. Okay, they don't exchange words; they just start touching.
no, they don't start touching. No, 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 no.
Okay.
That takes time. This is a thing. It's an interesting thing because that aspect of the novel builds so slowly, but it is through the confidence of learning sensuality in her own body and learning about herself as beautiful rather than wanting or missing this or whatever, um, that gives her the confidence to deal with the problem with the winery finances and to finally come to the point where she's going to do this heist with her grandmother and with the vagabond artist as well.
Now, what makes from a woman's perspective, a woman author's perspective, what makes a good sex scene?
Ah, well, sex scenes have to be extremely deftly written. If you're not writing eroticism, if you're writing, something that is designed strictly and solely to arouse the reader, that's one thing. But what I'm trying to do is to make the sex scenes part of the richness of the story. So if my characters are in some kind of sexual encounter, um, probably the reader is going to feel anticipation and what's going to happen? What are they going to do next? On a physical level, but not to what writers call writing on the nose, which means you don't say it, you just intimate what's going on, and it has to be very deftly done for it to work.
Yes. So a lot of representative language, a lot of allusions to certain things. Uh,
Yeah, like you just have to keep the reader always at the very front of your mind. So you're not telling the reader, you're not trying to educate them about anything, or you're not clobbering them. And just like sex is a very
yeah.
delicate thing. Well, it's the writing of it is also a very delicate thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a question of putting yourself in that place, feeling it, and then giving it to the reader in a way that the reader too can feel it.
Well, when it is deftly written, as you say, and I think John Updike was quite good at it, although he got a lot of criticism from feminists. I don't know why. He always populated his novels with women, and yes, there was sex, but I thought he did it very tastefully. It can actually be more titillating when it's done where it's not explicit because it allows
Yeah,
the reader's own mind to
that's right.
participate in it rather than here it is just in lurid detail.
That's right.
We all think of it differently, and
That's right.
it leaves room for the reader's imagination rather than, as you kind of were saying, delivering it with a shovel.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Now you
right.
you have two other novels as well. One's called Callie's Way, and another one's called The Oak Island Affair. So they both sound like, well, The Oak Island Affair certainly sounds like it's got romance involved. Callie's Way as well, or not?
Oh yes, actually, I have four novels. They Dead and Living was my first novel, and it all of my novels do have love as a central theme in one way or another. And the Oak Island Affair is about a search for gold on Oak Island, just off the east coast of Canada, just north of Maine. And there's been a search going on there for 300 years. So, and a lot of money, by the way, I think some of the major investors were Californians in the Oak Island treasure hunt. And in fact, I think it's ongoing. There's a TV show about the Oak Island treasure hunt right now. So, and actually, when I think back, Roosevelt was one of the major investors at one point during this history of this search for gold. So what I did was,
Theodore Roosevelt? Or was it Franklin?
um, no, I think it was Theodore.
Theodore, yeah, that makes sense.
I
Okay.
could be wrong about that. It's a long time ago that I wrote that book.
Sure, sure. Um,
But
so when
I use the treasure hunt as a metaphor for the power of, the gold and love. This is mythically has been put together for centuries. So I use that. I have a character there who's, looking for something.
Now, when you're at a cocktail party and you meet somebody new and that person says to you, Jane, what do you do for a living? What do you
Mhm.
say?
I tell them I'm a novelist.
And if they follow that up by saying, oh, wow, okay, what kind of stuff do you write or what kind of novelist are you? What do you answer?
Well, it's difficult, because first of all, because very few people have heard of me, because my books don't fit into a genre that's easily marketable. So what happens is I get published by tiny little publishers who don't have a lot of clout in the marketplace. Consequently, not a lot of people have heard of my work. And I can't say, oh, I write romance or I write fantasy or I write historical novels because my novels cross genres. And so I tell them that all of my stories have love as a central theme, as a central force moving through the stories. But the stories that I write tend to look at how history plays out through our lives in the adventures that make us who we are.
Hmm. So you do not consider yourself a genre writer. You actually it's a cross current of several genres. You're not dedicated as a romance novelist or detective novelist or what have you.
That's right. That's right. It would be much easier if I could just say, oh, I write fantasy.
Right. Yep.
Or romantasy, that's the big one now. But I
Yes, it
don't.
is.
I try to look at how the world works through our lives and how these forces play through our lives. So you have love on the one hand, but you also have the force of destruction in nature. And in humanity, that plays out as, ambition and greed and evil. And those things make really great stories.
Hmm. Yes. When
So,
did you get interested in fiction writing?
oh, well, I've always been a fiction writer at heart. I tried to be a journalist because, it was important to make a living. And I used to write fiction when I was a kid. But then when I got older, I was told that my best bet would be to be a journalist. So I did that, and I covered some court cases in northern Canada, which were very, very interesting. And one of them was the case of a man who did not know whether or not he was a murderer. And so he went to court to find out. And he had carried
Wow.
this problem for 25 years. So I covered that case and I interviewed the guy who was, the accused, and talked to him about what was that about? Like how can you not know whether or not you're a murderer? And and then I decided that I needed to write that as a fiction because I wanted to explore the dynamics behind the facts rather than trying to present a journalistic kind of thing. So I wrote it as a novel, and it did, it was shortlisted for an award, and that was good. So that was the first time I felt the real power of writing fiction to get at the truths that are behind the facts.
I just heard I watched this Hunter S. Thompson biopic, and they were talking about Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail in 1972. And the phrase was, or the statement was, it is the most accurate depiction of a political campaign and the least factually accurate. So, because a lot of times to really tell the story and to
Mhm.
make it something that people actually connect with in a way and make it really accurate, journalistic writing doesn't always do that. And even
Yeah.
though it was a nonfiction book, he wrote it in the new journalism, or gonzo journalism, as he called it, and it worked much better. We do
Mhm.
get at truths in fiction writing that are not necessarily factually based. But what does writing do for you, Jane? You obviously had the instinct early in life because you were writing fiction when you were a young girl,
Mhm.
and a lot of people who think they want to write fiction sit down and right away they're blown out of the water. It's incredibly difficult. It can be a very onerous task, but it can be rewarding too. What does it do for you?
Well, when I'm teaching, I used to teach creative writing at one of the universities up here in Canada and one of the colleges and some art schools and so on. And so I used to tell my students that when writing is working, I think it's the closest thing a human can do to flying. When you see a bird, the freedom of that bird and the grace and the lack of weight,
Mhm.
it's the same thing with writing when it's working. When a
Wow.
character is coming through you, it's the same thing, I think.
Wow. That's a great depiction. So talk about the writing life. I mean, there's something to be said about being a novelist and that kind of lifestyle. I mean, what is your experience, or what do you consider to be the experience of fiction writers?
Well, for me, it's something that's extremely central that has always featured in the center of my life. So after I'd been doing journalism for a while and I realized that I didn't want to do that, I became a professor well, an instructor, I like to call it, at a college. And when they were interviewing me for the job, they said, well, you're a writer. Like, how are you going to do this job and be a writer? And I told them that I would always write. And that, that I would do the job, but I would always write. And that was the case also as a mother. I would take time and my husband would take over the kids and I would go off for a weekend when I needed time, just to be that Jane. Uh, then I would write. When I was had little babies, I always would make it work so that I would be able to write because that's who I have always been. And it's as central to me as anything else that I do, eating
Hmm.
and all the other aspects of life. It needs to be there. If you don't have that, then it may be, if you're very lucky and you hit the zeitgeist at the right moment, you may become a best-selling author and it might all work out. But otherwise, I think you need that base level drive to do this. And for me, it's a question of how do I tune into that in in life. And I call it the laundry level of life tries to take over, so you have to keep the laundry level of life at bay. And I do it, for me, it works to do it first thing in the morning. So I will get up, I will meditate or do something like meditation, and and go to that still center place where the energy of life is able to come through. And then I'll go straight to my desk. And I can't let real life intrude.
So
So
you get the jump on the day.
I do it that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
When you're younger and kids are in school and stuff, you have to sort of be a little bit flexible about these things.
yes.
But yeah, that's what works best for me. And also, when I had a baby and he was a year and a half old and he used to nap. So I knew that he would nap and I would write. And okay, I only had a small time each day, but I could do that. Then I had a second child and no, I was pregnant with her and I had to rest when he was napping. I couldn't be at my desk. And that's when I discovered that my writing works much better with a pen on paper. So I would be lying on my bed and I would have a pen and I couldn't go because in those days we didn't have, iPads and phones and things that we could write on.
Hmm.
So I discovered that, wow, if I write with a pen on paper, it, it seems different. The words get out differently than they do when you're tapping on a computer.
Interesting. Julia Cameron's a big advocate of that, that write with your hand, the connection between the brain and the hand is superior to pecking at a keyboard.
Yeah,
So you found it
absolutely.
to be, and I've talked to other writers too who say, writing longhand is the way to do it for me,
Mhm.
and then it gets, eventually put into a digital format,
That's right.
obviously. So you're
Yeah.
up in the morning, you do your meditation. Let me ask you about this is a personal question because meditation is a personal act, but do you meditate on silence? Do you use a mantra? Do you count your breaths? Do you stare at a candle flame? What's your method?
Well, I've been doing something like this for many, many years. If you had asked me that 20 years ago, I would have answered very differently than I would now because I used to I tried a mantra and that didn't really work because I'm easily bored and I don't like any kind of artifice. So, a mantra seemed to me like it was just some kind of trick to try to trick my mind. And then I tried counting breaths and doing breath stuff and that was boring. So,
Quite
so
repetitive.
yeah, so I've done lots and lots of different things at different times. I find that if I sit up straight, then and I sit like a little bit off the ground so that I'm comfortable and I'd cross my legs. Jack Cornfield was the first guy that I used as a meditation teacher
Hmm.
and that actually worked for me. And he would have you sit with your legs crossed and your back straight. And the reason your back is straight is so that you are not um, out of alignment and your muscles are operating to keep you erect, so you're awake and you're relaxed. And then I like to put my hands, like my fingers, on top of each other and then point my thumbs up, which I think is a Zen way
Yes,
of doing
that's
it.
right. And it
And
also
I
is a
just,
form of
yeah,
like biofeedback. If
yes,
you if
that's
your
right.
thumbs are pressing together, then you realize you're tense. Or if they're falling apart, you realize, oh, I'm drifting, I'm falling asleep, basically.
Oh, that's what it is. I don't know. I just like it, so I do that. And then I like Dan Siegel's Wheel of Awareness these days. I don't know if you know Dr. Dan Siegel.
I don't know him. No.
He's in California. He's just I guess he's just south of you. And he's at UCLA, I think. He's a professor of psychiatry, but actually he's a pioneer in the field of what he calls neurobiology, and it interpersonal neurobiology, I think he calls it. Anyway, he talks about how the mind, what is the mind, and how does it relate to the body, and how does it relate to the world, and how the mind is something that is non-local, but it is embodied in us, and it is relational to the world around us, to the environment. And there's certainly a lot of science. Everything that he talks about is based on hard science, but it enters the field of spirituality just by virtue of what it is. And
Hmm.
so he has this thing called the Wheel of Awareness, where it's simply a method where you start by tuning into your senses and then into your body and then into your emotions in that moment, sitting there. What am I feeling? And then just letting it all go and just being. And the being self in my life has been incredibly powerful in a very, very subtle way. So that's how I get to that place, and I just be there, and there is the power of love working through me. I can feel it, and then I set my intentions for the day and my relationship to the world around me and the people close to me, and then I feel connected to the planet and to life, and then I can move into my stories.
So you move to the desk, you sit down and write. And what is your state of mind while you're writing? Or when you first sit down, what's your state of mind? And I have to tell you, the reason I ask this question is I remember Stephen King saying you have to sit down with an attitude. It sounds like he brings kind of an aggressiveness to the process.
Mhm.
That's not for everybody, though.
Mhm.
Can you identify a particular state of mind that you're normally in while writing?
Oh yeah, like when I come to my desk, I'm excited. I'm I'm really um I'm tuned in, and I'm in the flow, and I'm excited to, I want to be here. This is the only place I want to be. And then once I get into the actual work, though, what's already on the page, then I may be really upset because it's all crap. There has to be an awful lot of writing of crap in order to get to the good stuff. And so my frame of mind can be all over the place. I can be thrilled if something's working. I can I can be incredibly engaged if I have a scene that I like, but it's not working properly. And so I have to look at it and try and see what that's about, and what it needs, and where and how to make it work, and make it work with the other scenes that it's part of. So, I can be frustrated, I can be excited, I can be thrilled, I can be really, really disappointed because of what's on the page. It really runs the whole gamut of emotions.
So, how many, on average, how much time do you spend per day writing?
Well, I usually need 3 or 4 hours in the morning. More than that, if I were to do more than that, it would be things like typing or, just kind of the drudgery stuff that you have to do. But the actual creative drive, I would, at this point in my life, probably around 4 hours is the most that I can have.
That's a lot. That's a
It is
lot.
a lot. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I'm completely exhausted afterwards, and I can't understand it because I've just been sitting here. People tell me that I have to get up and move every hour, but I don't do that.
You go, yeah, okay, you'll go straight through. Yeah, some people do that Pomodoro method is 20 minutes and you get up and take 5 minutes off before you get back at it. What is the strongest part of your writing game? There's so many aspects to writing. There's character development, there's pacing, there's dialogue, there's scene setting. Is there any particular aspect to fiction writing that you feel like is your superpower or the thing you do better than any other aspect of writing?
Um, I think, I keep being told that, well, there's two things that come to mind actually. I keep being told that my books really take the reader to the place where they're set. So the people who, like Callie's Way was my third novel, and it was set in Crete, and Crete is very, very close to my heart. It's a novel that takes two love stories, one in the present day and one during World War II, uh, in Crete, where there was a very active underground movement,
Now,
and
this is the Greek island, Crete.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And the Cretan resistance against the Germans was very, very powerful there. It was a very dramatic and very hard time for those people. So, and there were some very, very interesting things going on in terms of the resistance. So, there's fabulous material for story there. And I took a today character who did not know about her family history in Crete and went to Crete and found out about it. And it sort of interweaves the today's story and the World War II story. And people who that book did well. It was number two on one of the Canadian bestseller lists, and it did well. But I was invited to a literary festival in England to present it, and so it. And the reason it did well is because people said that they really felt Crete when they read it. And of course, everybody loves a love story. So
Hmm.
that worked. And then the people who have read this one, The Angel Share, which is also set in Crete, have told me the same thing, that the book takes them to Crete and they can feel it, they can smell the air, and they feel like they're there. So again, it's a good place to set a love story.
Yeah. So, from a writing standpoint, what obsesses you?
Uh, that's a very difficult question to answer.
Well,
Um,
there might not be an answer.
what obsesses me? Well, I guess it's going to have to be the story itself. The story I'm telling. While I'm telling a particular story, I'm completely involved in it. So I'll be in the shower and I'll think, oh, I need to do this. Or the worst part is 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I need this scene, or I need to add that, or hey, wait a minute, the character in this scene should be doing this as well as that. She's thinking this, and this kind of thing. And it takes over my life most of the time.
Now, was there a turning point in your writing life, a stage at which maybe something happened where it was a breakthrough, or you realized, I mean, J.K. Rowling tells a story about, I think she was on a train when the concept of Harry Potter came to her, and she
Hmm.
said it was physically jolting, and she just knew this is what I'm going to be writing, and but she just knew that was meant to be her channel.
Hmm.
Did you ever have an experience or even have a writing coach tell you something or any kind of turning point when you're writing in your writing life when your writing took a turn for the sublime?
Oh, the sublime. Wouldn't it? There's only one J.K. Rowling's, and Harry Potter.
Yes.
Um,
I wasn't expecting you to match that, but
well, the sublime, I think the sublime comes and goes, and certainly I think you have to have that moment that you're talking about. You have to have that if you're going to write a novel. I note that you have written several novels. You must have felt that same way, that I have to write this novel,
yes. Yeah.
you know. And it comes like that's a very powerful force because writing a novel doesn't happen overnight.
It is a marathon. It's
Yeah.
absolutely a marathon, and it's easy to get frustrated with it. It's a lot of stops and starts, and also sometimes one novel's written really differently than another. I mean, just the mechanics of it. The
Hmm.
first one I ever wrote, I actually walked a lot and had a handheld recorder, and I would
Oh,
record. I just noticed that when I would take a walk, I would come up with ideas. So I thought I better take a recorder with me because so I don't have to try to remember it all and bash it all out.
yeah.
But the subsequent ones were not done that way. So yeah, it's different. I mean, for me anyway. But I know some writers, there's a big consistency to it, and that's maybe part of the magic is just the consistency of doing it the same way. It's
I
what
don't
works for
know.
them.
I think you do have to be grabbed. Like with the Oak Island affair, I know I was on Oak Island and I was staring down at the pit, which was the hole in the earth where all of these people two people had died in that hole. And, you know, all the explorers who were looking for this treasure had gone down into this hole. And I remember sitting there thinking, I I really want to write this story. Like this story has to be more than just the facts.
Mhm.
And the same with Crete. When I first went to Crete, I didn't really know why I was going to Crete, only that my uncle had left me some money. And I had two teenagers at this point, and we needed a new fridge. And I didn't want to spend the money on a fridge because my uncle had loved to travel. So I thought, well, I desperately need some time to write. Why don't I go to Crete? Because it's in Greece and it's the most southern island, and so it'll be warm. And the Minoan civilization, which predates the Greek civilization, was very, very interesting to me. So I'll go to Crete. And that's all I knew. And then I said to my family, who wants to come? And my daughter said, well, I will. She was just barely 17. And so she and I went to Crete for 6 weeks. And when we got there, I knew about the Minoan civilization. I was very interested in that. But that's pretty much all I knew about Crete. And as soon as I got there, I realized, like, oh my God, this is my place. This is the center of my universe. And I know I'm going to write a novel here about here. And yeah,
Wow.
that was something, yeah, it was a very powerful moment. And it was very interesting because I thought, like, why do I feel this way? I'm a Canadian. I have no Greek heritage. I have nothing in common with these women who are my age. I don't speak the language.
Mm.
And what is it that is so powerful here? And I think the answer to that is that it is the place of birth of Western civilization, you know. It's really at the center of who we are.
Yes. Yeah. You know, we have Americans. So often it seems like Americans think we invented democracy. You know, it was invented a long, long time ago,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
it was in Greece.
Yeah.
Um, is there a
Yeah.
writer who most inspires you? I don't know if there was one that um, I ask this question sometimes, and I usually don't get an answer because novelists tend to read widely,
Uh-huh.
and they get something from a lot of different places and don't necessarily have a number one person who is inspirational to them. But it
Hmm.
might be the case with you. I don't know. What do you say?
I would be in the company of the people who read widely and are inspired by many different people. Um, Recently, a writer who I just adore is Amor Towles, who wrote
Oh yeah,
the what was it?
Lincoln Highway was
Yeah,
one.
The Gentleman from Moscow.
The Gentleman from Moscow. Yep,
That book, I
big
thought that.
seller. He's a big seller.
Yeah, and he that's a wonderful piece of fiction, and also I like Richard Powers a lot.
He did
He's
the trees. What was the
yeah,
name?
the Overstory,
Overstory. Yeah,
and
Overstory.
yeah, and Playground, more recently Playground. He's done a beautiful job of talking about the environment on the planet and what it means to us, and I I just I just think he's quite brilliant, and there's so many you can go back through time, all the classical writers, people like Balzac and Dickens, and their writing style is out of fashion now, but they were very instrumental to me in realizing what fiction does and where its power is and how it works. And
Hmm.
then, of course, you have to talk about Shakespeare if you're talking about writing.
Right.
Absolutely have to.
Yep.
So, there are many, many, many writers who have inspired me through the years.
Now, do you outline your books or do you write strictly organically?
I used to write organically when I started, and that didn't work because you end up
I
with a
know
hell
the
of
experience. I wrote myself into a corner on the first two efforts I made, and I to abandon it. And after that, I started working more, not completely outlined, but having to understand where I'm heading.
Exactly, exactly. Like that's the same thing happened to me. Then I thought, oh, okay, well then I have to do an outline. But if you do an outline and then stick to it, it kills the fiction because it's like writing a recipe, writing to a recipe, I should say, and you don't have any freedom. So I do the same thing. I know where I'm going. I'm not sure exactly how or why, but I try to sort of frame it as I go, knowing where I'm going generally. So it's kind of a mixture of both. But I have to say, most recently, though, I've been working a little bit with a guy called Michael Haig. Do you know him? He's down where you are. He's in California.
Sounds
I think
familiar, but I don't know who he is. The name
he's
sounds
uh,
familiar.
he's a story master, and he knows about story construct, and he deals mostly with screenplays, but the construct of a story is it's the same one. It doesn't matter what kind of story you're talking about. And I found his stuff incredibly valuable in the Angel Share and also in another book that I'm working on right now. So
Now,
he's
has he written a book on storytelling?
yes, he has. He's got a book, forgotten what it's probably called Storytelling. But Yeah, and he's terrific. He's really good. He takes what are the elements of story that need to be there for a story to work. And he's extremely prescient about that. He's also he's kind of like I call him Robert McKee 2.0 because I don't know if you remember Robert McKee.
Oh
He
yeah,
was
I loved his book story.
yeah, yeah. And he was fabulous. Very powerful in my life when I was learning to write fiction. And now this guy, Michael Haig, he's terrific too.
See, I see his books here, Selling Your Story in 60 Seconds. He's got another one called Writing Screenplays That Sell. Um, and yeah, that's the only, there's some others. No, these others are Michael Hauser, but yeah, Michael Haig. Haig, Hauge.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
H-A-U.
and he's highly rated.
Yeah.
I see the number of stars he's got are, like 4.5 stars on both of those books I just mentioned.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to write a novel?
Well, that's another thing, it takes me years to write a novel, like several years,
Hmm.
because, well, I have a life, I would like to be one of these people who just does nothing but write every day, but I actually do have a life, and it calls to me, so sometimes I can't spend as many hours as I would like at my desk. I'm talking about 4 hours, and that's what I want, and that's what I do, but I can't do it every day because of the other things that I have to do. So consequently, it takes me a while. And I also do a lot of, research in terms of living life. So that takes time as well. And the consequence is that for a book to gestate and develop and then actually be delivered into the world takes me several years. This is another reason why you've never heard of me, because if you have a publishing contract with a big publisher, they want you churning out those books one a year, and I could never do that.
Well, remember Tom Wolfe, who was, very successful, one every like 11 years when he started writing fiction. But
Yeah,
because
that's
he
yeah,
sells as many copies as he does, they were always patient with him.
yeah.
But I would have
I
liked to have
wonder
read
how
more
he'd
of his
make
stuff.
out today, though.
Well, I mean, he only died um, a few years ago, so he was doing okay. I think, I mean, if you're selling a lot of books like that, I think that they give you a lot more of a timeline. Just to let us know when it's done. Actually, Bret Easton Ellis, I saw him being interviewed on YouTube, and author of American Psycho and The Shards. The Shards is excellent.
Mm,
And he said, I'm not, people write for a living, a lot of people in the
mhm,
business. And he says, I don't do that. He said, if I have something to write, I write it, but I go through these long stretches where I'm doing all kinds of other things. I have this,
mhm,
as you were saying, I have this life that I live.
mhm,
And if something inspires me, then I write. And then
mhm,
I approach my agent, publisher,
mhm.
and just say, this is what I've come up with. What do you think? Sort of,
Yeah.
sort of thing. Let me ask you for the aspiring novelists out there, or the struggling novelist, or any writer out there. What is your advice to somebody who wants to be a novelist and is working at it? What kind of advice would you give that person?
Um, I would I would tell them that they need to believe in themselves. You know, if they're doing what they're doing and it's coming from a place of genuine energy, and they need to believe in themselves. They need to get rid of that little judge that sits on the shoulder and says, "This is crap. Why are you doing this? Why do you think anybody wants to read your stuff?" You know, you just acknowledge that judge as who it is, as an energy in you, and then you say, "But I'm not paying attention to you. I'm doing what's mine to do." And, like I feel like what I do is my contribution to the world. And when I produce a novel, it's there to be enjoyed and for those who want to enjoy it. Just like a rose is there to be looked at by someone who wants to look at it. And so if you are a writer and that writing is what's yours to do, then I would say just believe in yourself and don't let yourself off the hook by telling yourself it's no good or by telling yourself you have to wash the kitchen floor or do the laundry. You do what's yours to do.
You're the first author I've had on the program who has given that advice, but I think it's spot on because there's so much self-doubt when it comes to any creative pursuit, and certainly with writing, there's lots of room for self-doubt. And because it's, as I said earlier, a marathon, it's a long experience. There's just so much you have to be committed to it, and there's so much time that elapses and so much room for self-doubt. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's just a great piece of advice and actually a rare piece of advice.
Well, that's good. The other thing too is you have to expect yourself to write a lot of absolute drivel.
Yes. Now, I ask occasionally, I ask authors, it's not an easy question to answer, but I'm glad to hear you say that because you really, I mean, I've told people with nonfiction writing too, business writing and everything, if you're going to write a 500 word essay, think more in terms of writing 2,000 or 3,000 words and then distilling it down to the what's good, just throwing away the dross and
Hmm.
polishing the stuff of value.
Hmm.
And I think people, unless you're well, actually, getting back to Julia Cameron, laying track is what she calls it.
Hmm.
And you really, if you're not producing copy and being willing to allow yourself to produce lousy copy, you're not going to produce the gems because those,
Hmm.
it's like panning for gold. You're going to find the gold, but you're going to have to go through a lot of rock before you
Hmm.
get to the yellow metal.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And then you
So, I
have to be
mean, do you have
willing,
go ahead and finish that thought, and then I have another question for you on along these
you,
lines.
you have to be willing to throw out the non-gold, as Stephen King says, you have to be willing to kill your darlings.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he wasn't that. Was he the one who said that? I'm sure he repeated it, but I thought there was an author before him that who had said that.
Oh, it
But
could be. I could be
it
making a
could
mistake there. Yeah,
it's the advice that really matters, not where it came from, because
that's
it's
right.
true. It is true. Although
Yeah.
anytime you have a famous author who said it, it lends credence. So that's always helpful as well. Um,
Uh-huh.
so I mean, for every 1,000 words that you write, Jane, what number of those words or percentage do you feel like you retain?
Oh boy, I don't even know.
Yeah, that's a hard question.
Yeah, because when you're writing a novel, it's 70,000, 80,000 words. And there's a lot of stuff that has to be knocked out, and or taken out, put aside, and then used in some other way or whatever. One of my early mentors told me that it's when I was writing Dead and Living, my first novel, and she'd say, "Well, what is this scene doing here? Like, why do we have to read this scene?" And I'd say, because, it's so beautiful. And she'd say, yes. And so if you knit a sweater and it has three arms, is it of any value to anybody? She said, what you have to do is you take off the third arm and you use it as a tea cozy.
I love that. I
It's
love that.
yeah, it's perfect. You have to be willing to do that. You have to realize what every scene has to do with every other scene.
Well, and I think you would agree that we read a lot of novels that are overwritten. They could have
Yeah,
used more editing or more distillation. I think
yeah.
sometimes people write to the target in terms of length that, well, a novel is 350 to 400 or 450 pages. And that's not necessarily the case. In fact, it seems like novellas are very popular these days, something more along the lines of a,
Hmm.
100-page book or
Yeah.
novella. So, well, Jane, congratulations on the new novel and best of luck with that. And thank you for coming on the program.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Mike. I've really enjoyed talking with you.